Good afternoon. I've been going through the book of John, but right now I want to pause a second. If you got friends or you got grandparents or you have parents or you have young children, uh, especially school age children, you need to listen to what I'm about to share with you all. Okay? Uh, I got a master's degree in Christian education. Okay? So I know a whole lot about human growth and development. I know I have studied the history of education from the beginning of time. I understand the different contribution that various cultures had put in, whether it was Hebrews, Greeks, the Romans, everything, how they come up with a core development. I know a whole lot about education, especially from a theistic Christian worldview. And I want to tell you right now the serious danger your children are in if they're going to get reprogrammed in their minds during a very influential time in their lives. And I want to talk about that, okay? Lenin, he talked about using useful idiots. What is a useful idiot? And that's how communism. A useful idiot is somebody that you can use that won't take the time to research what it is they're going to use you for in order to push their propaganda or their nonsense or their lies or whatever it may be. We saw this during the pandemic when businesses, municipal governments, nursing homes, they closed down there and people couldn't even see their loved ones in a nursing home. How many people died and they weren't allowed to be with their loved ones because of the stupid lie that they believed that they called science, which was a farce and it wasn't true. But you have all these useful idiots in America pushing a narrative that is basically rooted from the pits of hell. Now I'm going to expose it, especially because it upsets me when they start dealing with children. I understand cultural mediums, and I understand that if you want to change a culture, where do you start? You start with kids. Okay? You groom them to begin to accept ideas that they will come to accept as being normal, even though it is abnormal. Here's the danger, and I want to tell you the danger right now of subjecting your children, your grandchildren, to this woke mentality that want to reorientate their mind to this gender reorientation, to all this liberalism that they're trying to put into their heads, to be all-inclusive and accepting of everybody and everything. Okay? Here's the danger with that. And I'm going to show you about the Hebrew model and the Christian model for raising children. But let me just tell you this real quick. When we are born, we're born with a sin nature. Unless you're born, later on you're born again, you get a new nature. A sin nature is inclined to evil. Okay? It doesn't have any propensity within itself, since it's rooted in its very nature to be anti-God. Children have a sin nature that can be appealed to. They're naturally curious. They're naturally open to learning new things. They will begin to explore things in the area that pedophiles will suggest to them. It will damage their brains, their psyche, and their emotion for the rest of their lives. Okay? They have a sin nature to appeal to. And the sin nature likes to be tantalized. It likes to be, wow, they look for pleasure. This looks pleasurable. You offer a kid candy, what are they going to do? They're going to run and get it. Now you open them up into areas of pleasure that they shouldn't even be thinking about at that age. And you're going to have major psychological damage and emotional damage in these young kids for the rest of their lives. Let me tell you, and as I get into this, I was fortunate, really fortunate. You know, I didn't have that kind of training growing up. But I studied under Dr. Howard Hendricks. And if you want to know, I'm going to mention some names here just so that you can understand, hey, Manny, what gives you the authority and right to speak on these things? And I'm going to show you. Okay, I studied under Dr. Hendricks for a number of years. And he's gone now with the Lord. But look up about how influential he was in the Christian community, especially in the realm of Christian education and pedagogy. Okay, I studied under Kenneth Gangle. Look him up. I studied under Norm Geisler, probably the most brilliant apologetics in this last 2 centuries. Okay, and I had the privilege of sitting under him. In fact, they're doing a movie on his life right now, Not Qualified, something like that. And he's gone to be with the Lord too. I studied under Dr. Dwight Pentecost, Walvoord. I mean, I studied under some of the most brilliant theologians that this world has ever put together collectively. Okay? They produce such men like Chuck Swindoll, Dr. Tony Evans, Dr. David Jeremiah, Chip Ingram, Zane Hodges, Ryrie from the Ryrie Study Bible, Merle Unger, Walvoord, who's written a lot on eschatology, J. Vernon McGee, who you hear probably on the radio all the time, Bruce Wilkinson, who did the thing on Walk Through the Bibles, both in the Old Testament and New Testament, Harry Ironside, one of the most renowned Bible scholars. When you go to this school and you get trained, they teach you how to think. They don't teach you to believe something. They teach you how to think so you don't become a useful idiot. Okay? We live in a country today loaded, whether it's not in municipal governments, it's in local, in corporations, running different businesses that are loaded with useful idiots. They may know how to run a business and they may know how to do this, but they don't know how to think collectively in terms of worldviews. They don't know the implication. If they do this, this is what's going to end up happening. Okay. So we live in a generation, as we say, you can't argue with a woke person if he's a useful idiot, because he isn't going to take the time to think. He's just going to push this narrative. Very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. You know, the Bible has a lot to say about human growth and development, especially development of a child. There's a Hebrew model. The Hebrew model is this: from birth to 5, the main thing that the Hebrew parents would teach their children was obedience. But the obedience had to contain 3 elements. It had to be done right away, with the right heart attitude, and in the right way. So if I was to tell my son, hey, Aaron, I want you to take the garbage out to the alley right now. And he said, yeah, Dad. And an hour later, I come back and it's still sitting there. He wasn't obedient, okay, because he didn't do it right away. So I come to him again another time. I said, Aaron, I want you to take the garbage out to the alley right now. He says, yeah, Dad. And instead of taking it out to the alley, he throws it over to the neighbor's yard because he doesn't want to walk all the way to the alley. Okay, he wasn't obedient. First time he wasn't obedient because he didn't do it right away. Second time he wasn't obedient because he didn't do it in the right way. Third time I come to Aaron, I said, hey, Aaron, I want you to take the garbage out to the alley right now. He said, sure, Dad. And he gets real mad at me. As soon as I walk away, he flips me off. He curses me under his breath. He kicks the cat on the way out, slams the door, and takes the garbage all the way out to the alley. He didn't do it with the right heart attitude. The Hebrew parents would take the time to teach their children to do things right away, in the right way, with the right heart attitude. So I come to my son, Aaron, another time, and say, Aaron, I want you to take the garbage out to the alley right now. He says, sure, Dad. Stops what he was doing, picked it right up, gathered it all together, On the way to the alley, he even takes his neighbor's garbage. And all the time singing, "Oh, how I love Jesus." There he was obedient. He did it in the right way, right away, with the right heart attitude. He learned obedience. That by the time he's 5 years old. Now, from 6 to 12, what's another thing the Hebrew parents would do? And this is the age where they're trying to get your children. They would teach their children the moral laws of God. Okay? What was right, what was wrong, according to God's word. Okay? So you get them in the word, you get them in the devotional studies, you introduce them to the gospel. Okay, you introduce them to apologetics, you introduce them to witnessing, you introduce them to not only learn, but to do Christianity. Okay? And that was real important, especially at that age when these kids are like sponges. They're going to soak up all this information. Okay? And then they're going to be tested by it. What happens to a Jewish kid when he turns 12? He has a bar mitzvah. Why do they do that? Because they are now going to be presented to society as an adult. From the age of 12, they are responsible for their own problems, not their parents. Okay, we live in a generation today where children are blaming their parents for everybody. You know? I think one person that says, we need to teach people how to be responsible again. You know, when you go away from home, you can't be blaming your parents or be blaming your teachers or be blaming your boss. You need to take responsibility for your choices and your decisions. So from birth to 5, they learn obedience. From the ages of 6 to 12, they would learn the law in the Old Testament, okay, and through Deuteronomy. And that's what Jesus did. Okay, that's what the disciples did. Okay, and then from 12 to 20, these are their testing years. These are the years where the Hebrew parents would create opportunities for their young people to put in practice these things they learn so that your convictions can become theirs. Okay? There's a big difference between conformity and conviction. Conformity is I got to do it because of. Conviction is I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do. And that's what you hope in your teenagers. But you subject your kids to this gender reorientation, I'm going to tell you right now, you're going to have a major, major crisis on your hands when they become teenagers. Especially they're going to invite people over to your home. They're going to go out and do activities. You don't know where they're at. You got an idea what they're doing. You want to go through all that? Leave your kids in public schools and you guarantee you're going to go through all that. Leave them to be taught by somebody that is woke, that is a useful idiot. And that's what's going to happen. You think our educational systems and public schools and universities and graduate schools isn't full of useful idiots? You have to think, parents. If I could just help one parent or grandparent pull their kids out of public school, and this message tonight has been worth it. Okay. But I don't see how anybody responsible, they don't know anything about education. Okay. Not only that, but your child is going to adopt the behavior and the morals and the habits of your teacher, because teaching doesn't take place in a vacuum. What a person believes is going to come across. What I believe is coming across. Okay? You keep listening, you're going to be a lot like me. Okay? So, and if you don't want to be like me, then I'd suggest you go find somebody else that you want to be like. But that's the dynamics of teaching. That's why in the Bible in James it says, let not many of you be teachers, for such will incur a stricter judgment. There are times when I'll do a presentation or I'll do a post and I have somebody come along and they want to hitchhike on my teaching and they want to use my posts and videos to start teaching. Okay, that's not using a lot of integrity. They got their own posts and things to do that. Now, if they want to ask a question or they want to compliment on that, that's fine. But to go on and all of a sudden pick up on something and start building on something else, it doesn't show a lot of integrity. Okay. Now, so the reorientation, you want your children to grow as Jesus grew, or do you want them to become completely reorientated in terms of gender identification, which is a whole nother subject when it comes to your personal self-worth and what you believe, who you are and what you are. So from 0 to 5, they would learn obedience. From 6 to 12, they learn the law. From 13 to 20, these are their character building years. It's where they're going to develop conviction. From 20 to 30, the Hebrew parents, the young people in that age group, listen to this, completely opposite what a lot of Americans. Americans are always, oh, shit, I graduated from college, I got to climb that ladder of success. And the Hebrews would teach their children to climb down, to teach them how to be servants of others, to teach them responsibility, to teach them how to be humble. Okay? Then when they're from 30 to 50, those are their ministry years, their productive years. Now they've gone through these stages of development, and God's going to really use them. Then 50 and over, those are your wisdom years. Those are the years that you use to communicate all the things you learned in your life to the younger people. Okay, and that's what I do, and I'm sure that's what a lot of you all do. Unless you want to go through life like a useful idiot. Okay, if you ever read the book, The Road Less Traveled, the author starts off his book by saying, life is difficult. He says, but as soon as you grab the idea that it's difficult, then it becomes easy. Well, I'll take it another step. That life is difficult, but it's a lot more difficult if you're an idiot. Okay, and that's just the way it is. There's a good human growth development passage in the New Testament. It's found in Luke 2:52. And you know the story, Jesus had gone to Jerusalem with his parents, and on the way home, his parents noticed he was missing. And he was missing for a number of days, and when they finally found him, they were astonished. Where were you? And he says, you should have known I would be in my Father's house. He wasn't disobedient. He was 12. And you're in character building years now, from 12 to 30, what did he do? And then it says in Luke 2:52, and it says this, and Jesus grew in 4 dimensions. He grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. He grew in wisdom, not just knowledge, he grew wise. It says in stature, he grew physically. He was by this time, a strong young man. Okay, working hard as a carpenter. And in favor with God, he grew spiritually. And in favor with men, he grew socially. You want a well-rounded, developed child, then you need to let them grow as Jesus grew. You need to introduce them to the kind of training that the Hebrew parents gave their kids, grandkids. And it goes even deeper. Somebody says, well, how often did they go to school? I said, well, they went to school 24 hours a day. It says, when you rise, when you walk, and when you sit down, school is always on. There's always these teaching moments you can find to communicate God and his word. You're not going to do that in a public school where God is not allowed and his word is shunned on. It's not going to happen. Instead, what they're going to do is introduce your kid to all these perversive ideas so that these wicked pedophilias or whatever you call these guys can do the things they want to do to your children, and they're not going to be satisfied until everybody is like them. That's why God flooded the earth to begin with. That's why he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. That's why great nations have risen and fallen. You have good people I think it's Bonhoeffer that says probably one of the worst evil that people could do is is to sit silent and do nothing and say nothing and stand up for nothing. You know, this is your moment. You got to fight. If you're not, you're going to lose this country. You're going to lose your kids. You know, don't give it a foregone conclusion. How many battles have you been in before and thought, man, this doesn't look good? You know, I've been in a lot of competition like that. So it's just no way I'm going to win this thing. But you hang in there, and somehow or another you find the strength and the resource and the stamina to keep going. You know, and to not give up. And God will help us to do that. But you got to fight the battle against these woke people, or you're going to, you know, you might as well go find somewhere else to live. Because this country is going to go, you know, to hell in a handbasket quickly. Okay? Sickening what they're doing to Disney World and what they're doing in the schools and the gross politicians that we had. I even posted this morning. People are waiting for the 2022 election. What are you going to do? Negotiate with pedophiles then? With liars and thieves? You don't negotiate with them. You drive them out from your community. The only influence they have, is the Bible teaches, is negative. And I've been telling people for years now, if you want to have things turned around, you got to drive these scoffers out of the land. Okay? And I know it's really difficult right now because our land is what? It's been infiltrated by multi-religions and worldviews. It's not the same anymore. And that's a shame too, because Christians are the ones with the truth. We're the ones with the Word of God. We're the ones that have the good news of free, eternal life with God and purpose. If anybody should shine and stand up strong now, it is believers. There are going to be some, and we call them the remnant, just like it did in the Old Testament, when Israel kept going into idolatry over and over and over and over again. They kept rejecting the prophets' messages. They kept rejecting God as their king. And finally, God just quit talking to them. 400 years, he did not talk to him. He didn't begin to talk to him again until John the Baptist came on the scene. And we're in danger of that happening again. In fact, Jesus says, you're like lukewarm water, I'm going to spit you out of my mouth. Unless you start standing up individually and you find yourself among the remnant. You find some other like-minded believers to encourage one another to say something, do something, make a difference. Or you can do nothing and say, well, you know, not my job, not my, like Cain did, am I my brother's keeper? Think about what I said. Think about how you want your kids to turn out. And find the courage to do the right thing. God bless you all.